That's a very good defense. We knew coming in statistically in every way, shape, and form, that's a very talented defense. I thought we ran the ball and dominated up front. That showed a lot of good stuff against a very good team. We dominated at the line of scrimmage in the first half. There's just no two ways about it. That's what we did. That's on tape. But what we didn't do is we didn't score points. So we got to be able to convert when we're running it at 6 yards a carry, and our O-line is blocking up front on the run as well as we're blocking. Those things got to get converted into touchdowns.
In this 2023 NFL Draft, to select Bryce Young.
2, 1.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Carolina Pro Football Report post-game edition here at Bank of America Stadium. I'm Kevin Tolbert along with Skylar Callahan from Sports Illustrated, and today the Carolina Panthers just dropped to the Dallas Cowboys 33-10 of final score. A very, very tough afternoon, especially toward the end of the game. But let's go back to the start. First half penalties, Skylar.
Yeah. Big
deal for the Panthers.
Absolute killer. Gave him 10 points at minimum. You had the one personal foul call on Amari Barno. You had the defensive pass interference on Dante Jackson. You had Deshaun Williams come in with a late shove on what was a third down, Kev. They would have had to stop. They would have forced Dallas to kick a field goal. Instead, it extends the drive, and they end up capitalizing on that by finding the end zone. So it's just, you can't do stuff like that. And when you're a team that is now 1-9 on the season, the margin for error is very thin in the NFL, but especially when you're 1-9, you're not playing well, you can't have those types of things happen. You can't have self-inflicted wounds happen that regularly. So penalties have got to be cleaned up, and if they don't, this type of stuff's going to continue.
So where do you see them starting to close the gap and be able to fix those penalties? Because it seems like they've had good practices, but they're not able to translate what they've been doing in practice and get it on the field.
Well, I think it's what you said before we hopped on here. It's a lot of frustration. Guys are upset. They want to do too much at times, and I think in some of the cases it's frustration, but I think some of it's just trying to do too much and trying to force the issue, trying to make plays happen that aren't necessarily there, not doing their job, doing your 1/11th, which is what they like to say a lot. So it's got to get back to clean football, and we've even seen some special teams penalties that have really haunted this team this year. Special teams unit in general has been fairly good if you take the penalties out. So that's the biggest thing with this team right now is the penalties outside of the offensive struggles, of course.
Now, another area where they've struggled is keeping Bryce Young upright. This O-line has gone through a lot of changes, lots of injuries, even a scary moment for Austin Corbett today going down. They've got a lot of work to do still on this offensive line.
A ton. I mean, I don't even know where you start. I mean, 4 of the 5 starters were a part of what this team relied on last year. Now it's a completely different scheme, completely different offensive approach. But I think a lot of it is coming down to scheme. These guys are used to playing that downhill style of football where they run the ball in between the tackles. Now they're spreading things out. Everything's different. And I think they need to get back to relying on the run game, as you like to say, getting the tight ends involved in the passing game. But I don't know if it's really an indictment on these guys that are on the offensive line. I think it's really just they're good players just not playing in the system that they're meant to play in.
Now, despite the miscues on the O-line, the run game has had some sparks lately. Today was one of those things. Their yard per carry average well up from recently.
Yeah, Chuba Hubbard did a really good job. I think 57 yards on 10 carries as a team. I think they ran for about 6 yards a carry. Outrushed Dallas, actually, which if you would have told me that before the game, I would have said you were crazy with the way that they run the ball at times. But I think, again, when you get those guys playing downhill, you don't have them pinning and pulling as much, and there's not so much zone action. I think you're going to have success. And I think that's what Frank has to understand is, look, these guys are downhill power trap type of blocking scheme guys, and that's what this team needs to get back to if they want to find success on the ground, which will then give success to Bryce Young in the air.
Now, the biggest point of contention for me, you know what it is.
Yeah.
the big guys, the tight ends. Usually in Frank Reich's offenses, the tight ends are a mainstay.
Yeah.
This year, not so much. I believe the most that they've been targeted in a single game is 8 times. They have to get these guys more involved. You see what happened with Tommy Tremble, how they used him today. Are you surprised that they haven't been doing that a lot more?
Absolutely. Probably more so with Hayden Hurst. I mean, obviously he was out today with the concussion protocol, but
Absolutely.
I mean, he's someone that's been productive in every offense, just about every offense he's been in, whether it was in Atlanta or in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow. And you thought that coming into the season, when you have a tight end like that and you have a running back like we thought in Miles Sanders, who could be a weapon out of the backfield in the passing game, that's what a rookie quarterback's best friend is, a running back and a tight end that he can check down to in just about any situation. Those two guys haven't shown up. And to your point with your guy, Tommy Tremble, I mean, he's shown that he's a versatile piece that can do a lot of different things, but he's not been used, I think, to the extent that they need to get him involved.
Defense has played very well this year, especially in the passing defense. But at what point does the frustration level kick in for those guys? I mean, they are keeping this team in the game for long stretches, but, you know, as we saw in today and in other games, toward the end, obviously they're getting a lot more tired on the back end of these games, not able to, you know, stop point totals from ramping up, which is contributing to the losses, but definitely not the fault of the defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you're getting to this deep in the season, you kind of are who you are at this point, right?
Right.
So the defense knows that too. You're going to find some small improvements each week with Bryce and this offense, we would think. But, again, you're getting to the latter part of November here. There's not a whole lot of runway left to improve. So I think the defense knows that going in, look, you're going to have to win this game in the teens, right? If you get into the 20s, it's probably not going to end well. Because this offense is not built or engineered to come from behind. They're not built to score 20-plus points in a game. Sure. So I think the defense knows that. They're frustrated by it. But at the end of the day, you can only control what you can control. And I think when you get to this point where you're well out of reach of the playoffs and you're just struggling week by week, I think you just have to look at this as – you don't want to be selfish with it, but you got to look at it and say, like, this is what I'm putting on tape, not only for the Panthers, if I want to be a part of this thing next year, but for the other 31 teams, if there's guys that are in free agency like Frankie Louvu or Brian Burns, those types of guys, what they put on tape is going to be seen by everybody.
Now, with regard to putting things on tape, Bryce Young has definitely been doing that this season. Obviously not translating to wins, not translating to the touchdowns that we'd like to see. But he's definitely shown an amazing toughness. Frank talked about that, as well as Bryce in the post-game press conference.
You know, one of the questions about Bryce coming in was, you know, with his size and weighing under 200 pounds and being 5'10", could he take it? And I think he's answered that question week in and week out. He physically is one tough dude. Never wants to come out, can take hits. You know, I think that's a credit to his physical toughness and his tenacity. Yeah, that's been, you know, week in and week out. He doesn't flinch.
First and foremost, you know, I lean in on my faith through ups and downs. And, you know, of course, I don't expect anything, good or bad. I'm well aware. I believe God guides my life. You know, big picture, what happens, that's out of my control. And I trust God through everything. So I lean on my faith, lean on my teammates, lean on the coaching staff. And yeah, of course, it's not ideal, it's tough, it's hard, but it's for a reason. What that reason is, again, that's not for me to know, not for me to dwell on. You know, I lean in on my faith, lean on the guys in there. We all lean in on each other, and you know, we have to take it for what it is and figure out a way to make it positive and keep building off of it.
So we all know he's tough. He's shown that through this season. But where does he go from here?
You just got to hang in there, right? Just throw him back out there again next week and hope that he can continue to take the beating. But, I mean, look, The one thing, really the biggest knock that I had on Bryce coming out of college was what? His size. We didn't know what that was going to translate to in terms of the beating that he would take from an offensive line standpoint, or if it was going to be what we saw last year a little bit with Baker Mayfield and the batted passes. Well, those haven't shown up. We've seen a couple here or there, but I think Baker had more in those first 4 or 5 games than Bryce has had all season. So the batted passes are not an issue, and obviously him taking a beating has not been a problem to this point. But again, there's still 6-7 games left in the season. That could take its toll for sure. But yeah, you just got to keep going back out there and hope that you can find some easy outlets, whether it be the tight ends or the running backs, to get the ball out quick. That's the biggest thing. I think they need to condense some of these routes and not go as deep down the field.
Definitely the tight ends, more tight ends. So Frank Reich, if you're listening, more tight ends. But we got to talk about this, the hot seat.
Yeah.
A lot of talk going on all around the league about Frank Reich's job security, but not just Frank Reich, also Scott Fitterer as well. Do you feel that at this time either of those guys are in jeopardy?
I think you have to say that they would be, right? I mean, with the way things have panned out, I mean, Scott even said it himself last offseason, like, look, we're a quarterback away from really kind of emerging in the NFC South and kind of taking this thing over. They felt like the roster was built to compete now. They just needed to get a good quarterback in play to take that next step. Well, they got the quarterback and everything else hit the fan. So, yeah, I mean, you look at some of the guys that they brought in, Hayden Hurst, Miles Sanders, like we said,
Sure.
they have not shown up, and they paid a lot of money for those guys. And in the draft process, they traded up to get DJ Johnson, and he's been a non-factor for the most part. So there's a lot of issues with this roster. You look at the trades he's made throughout the years, the Christian McCaffrey trade, you don't really get anything out of that.
Right.
DJ Moore, you go up and get Bryce Young, but you give up so much to maybe get the wrong quarterback. Again, that's a different topic for a different day, but I think right now it's hard to say that either one of them are going to get fired anytime soon. I think a lot can change in the next few weeks. But I would say probably the pressure's more on Scott more than Frank.
Well, let's hope that they're able to turn something around because they're headed to the Tennessee Titans next week.
And it's going to be a tough battle. They dropped a big one today to Jacksonville, divisional game. They got blown out. So I wonder where their psyche is. They're 3-7, I believe, on the season or something like that. So it's definitely a winnable game if Bryce can stay up in the pocket and not have a bunch of green all over his jersey. But we'll see.
All right. Well, that'll do it for the Carolina Pro Football Report here on ADSN. I'm Kevin Tolbert along with Skylar Callahan from Sports Illustrated, and we'll see you in Tennessee.